Hey guys, Teresa with Sippy Couture. Thank you so much for checking out my channel, and if you've been here before, welcome back. Before we really get started, I'm going to ask that you guys please give me a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe to this channel. All of those things really does a great bit on helping me continue to make these videos for you guys and make this little journey possible, and your support means so much to me. For this tumbler, we used Flynn Supplies, and I just love this ivory glitter from Backfist Customs. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it. It's an easy one, but it did take a bit of work with those rhinestones. I really hope you love it because I definitely love this one. Let's get started. I have a 32 plump from Tipsy Magnolia pulled from this design. I went ahead and sanded it and sprayed it with a flat white spray paint. You want to make sure for this step with the glitter that we're doing, we don't want it to be drippy or runny behind this glitter because we are going to do tack it method. And if it is, you'll be able to see any inconsistencies in your paint. So make sure you get a few light coats on there to just give you a really pretty solid color white. For this line that I'm doing, I have my Cup Stripe Assistant from the Aiming to Make Everything. I just stand my tumbler on there, and I have this weeding pencil with a little needle in there that I'm using to just give myself a straight line. You can use a pencil if you want, but that was the closest thing to me, so I grabbed that. This little piece of clear contact paper, the size of this will be linked down in the description. Everything will be listed and linked in the description to tell you the width that this is. It may be just over 2.5. I did not want to go much thicker because I wanted to be able to see as much of that vinyl as possible. The vinyl is absolutely gorgeous, and having to cut anything away from that really broke my heart. So I wanted to maximize it and make sure I could see it from every angle. So I'm laying this down. Like I said, I used that little strip that I did with my little weeding pen to give me a really straight line. And I'm putting this clear piece of contact paper on there just to hold space. All it's doing right now is holding that space and letting me know where I need to stop and where I want that glitter to go. So once I kind of get an idea of where that's going to line up, I have my vinyl and I'm getting rid of the edges. For me, it's easier to get rid of these white strips on the vinyl now instead of have to worry about cutting it off later and getting rid of it. So just while I have a minute, I'm going to take away the bottoms and the tops to help me line it all up straight. Alright, so I find it a lot easier to wrap vinyl on a tumbler when you don't have a ton extra. So what I'm doing right here is I'm laying this vinyl right up against where that clear contact paper is on one side. I'm wrapping it around and then I'm marking that vinyl where it needs to be trimmed off. That way, by the time this extra piece is gone, what I have in front of me is just the piece that needs to go all the way around the tumbler. I did cut it slightly too thin, but it's okay. It just gave me a little more room to work with and it still worked out great. So I have this piece right here. We're going to do the hinge method. That's where we cut off a little bit of that transfer paper on the back. That way we can lay this down without the full piece of paper really getting stuck to anything. From there, I just go ahead and I push it off the back of the tumbler by rubbing my hands from the inside of it all the way out. And that really helps me to get a nice wrap around the tumbler without it really getting away from me. Once I have that down in place, I'm going to remove that piece of clear contact paper that was holding the space for my glitter, and I'm also going to trim off the bottom piece of this vinyl. I don't finish the bottom of my tumblers along the edges. I leave that stainless, so I always like to use a cup edging tool to make sure I get a really crisp, clean line around the bottom of this tumbler the first time. For the top of the tumbler, if you wanted to, you could have measured this out ahead of time. I don't know why it didn't cross my mind. So what I decided to do was I took the vinyl, I tucked it inside of my tumbler, just pull it fairly tight and get it in there, and it will lay really flat inside of there. I'm running it along my cup edging tool to go ahead and give me another straight line around the top. That way everything will give me a really nice clean look once it's all done. For this next step of glitter, we're going to take some painter's tape and we're going to cover our vinyl right on the edges. Doing this will make it a lot easier to go ahead and get this glitter and tack it down without it getting all over our vinyl. It's easier to just tape it off now than to try to be super careful for me because, I can't cut a straight line, much less paint one with glue. So we're going to go ahead and get our tack it. I do not water it down. I use it straight out the bucket and I get it on there spread out very evenly. You want a thin bristled brush for this, something fine. The Mod Podge brush would be great. Those fluffy makeup brushes are great too. You just want it to be very thin so that you don't have streaks from your tacket. The glitter I'm using for this is Ivory from Backfist Customs. This glitter is absolutely gorgeous. I can't stress enough how much I love this glitter. It gives a really soft, light ivory to it. One coat of this tack it method wasn't quite enough, so I went overkill. I did 3. I did 3 coats of tack it. The second coat of tack it, you're going to want to put a little more glue than you did on that first coat because it does start to absorb into the glitter. And same thing as before. You can tell when this glue starts to get set because your paintbrush gets a little tacky and tends to grab to it. I do use my heat gun to help encourage it along a little quicker just because I don't have any patience instead of letting it just sit there and dry. So we're going to get that on, let it dry just a little, or use your heat gun, drop your glitter on, and then we're rubbing it in with our hands. We don't need to go super crazy right here, nothing crazy aggressive. We're just trying to lay it flat as usual. Once you get all of your glitter down, it's time to remove your tape. I like keeping the tape very, very close to the tumbler, and I pull it on an angle towards my glitter. If you were to pull it away from your glitter, you're going to pull up the ends of your vinyl since it isn't really secured in place. It's stuck on there. You know, we didn't put any epoxy or anything. So you want to keep this really close so that you're not pulling up any of your vinyl. Pull it on a slight angle, and that will help to give you a nice crisp line. Once that tape is removed, go ahead on all your edges and make sure that the vinyl really is on there good. You don't have any bubbles. If you have anything like a bubble, then you can take your craft knife and run through and just give yourself a little score on a line, and then wiggle that bubble out. But I didn't have any issues with bubbles. Take some time after you do this step and really make sure that your extra glitter is wiped off the tumbler. After you have all of your loose glitter removed, go ahead and take it outside and give it just a quick, easy burst of clear spray paint to make sure that the glittered tack-it section is really on there and nothing's going to move around. The last thing I wanted was for that to come loose and to get onto this really gorgeous vinyl sheet. For the epoxy that I'm using, it is Artist Cure epoxy from Flint Sisters Boutique. This stuff is absolutely amazing. If you haven't seen the review that I did on it, go ahead and check it out. It's on this channel, and it's just so easy to work with. The shine that it gives is amazing. I'm going on first, and I'm only doing the vinyl. Like I said, I don't want any of my glitter to transfer over onto the vinyl sections, so I went first and I got my epoxy only on the vinyl just to make sure that it was going to be set. Once I had that down and I was confident that nothing was moving from my glitter sections, I went around and did the glitter, and then made sure all of my edges was coated. Once that was done, I grabbed my torch, pop any extra bubbles, and that was it. We're going to let this set. Once again, I'm going through with my cup edging tool, and I'm going to trim off that glitter, the extra glitter that's around the bottom. I have this to the same setting that I did that vinyl, so it's going to give myself a really nice clean line all the way around. I should have just taped this off, but to be honest with you guys, I'm so horrible with remembering to remove tape that it ends up being more of a mess than anything else. Once this epoxy is set though, it is really easy to take this off and to clean it. I just take that cup edging tool, like I said, run it all the way around, and then I take my craft knife and I go through and loosen that layer of epoxy. And then I take a dry baby wipe with some acetone and I go through and just clean off the bottom. This whole bottom that I'm cleaning off right now is just like I said before, it's where I'm not going to have anything. It's just going to be the exposed stainless to make sure I get a really good seal with my epoxy. And getting my acetone and my baby wipe is pretty much all I need to get that cleaned off and ready for the next step. Another thing I do during this step that I don't like doing at my desk, but I didn't feel like moving my camera, I give this a light sand with some wet sandpaper, and that's just going to help me have it ready for my next step. That way my vinyl will have a really good grip to this tumbler. So I sanded this really well with some Imperial wet sandpaper, and then I wash it with Dawn dish soap in my sink, and then it's ready for vinyl. Okay, so I just love the thought of having Boss Lady in a really pretty floral. So I went ahead and took my vinyl and I ran that through my Cricut. I do have plans to rhinestone this, but I know that with the different color rhinestones I'm doing, I wanted it to have some type of colored background. That way, if the rhinestones weren't too spaced together, it would still have some color behind it and kind of play off any gaps that might be in it. I'm still new to rhinestoning, so I figured this was the safest bet for me. The fonts and sizes for Boss Lady will be listed down in the descriptions. I wanted a very specific layout for it, and since I have that area already mapped out in a certain width, I needed to make sure this fit inside of it. So I designed it on the Cricut and I measured it out to be exactly what I needed it to be. I'm layering this off of my tumbler just so that I don't mess anything up. And I have the word boss. I'm putting it on some transfer tape. The tape that I'm using for this is clear contact paper. I love using this to transfer because the vinyl doesn't completely want to stick to it if you don't want it to. And I'm very sorry about my head being in the way. I couldn't quite zoom in. I don't know what I was thinking. So I have this down. I'm going to squeegee it onto there. And then as I remove my transfer tape, I'm going to push down on my squeegee, and that's going to leave the vinyl behind. It's going to leave it on that piece of the backing of the clear contact paper. Doing that will then allow me to take the word lady and lay it right where it needs to be in the cutout from where that offset was sliced through the word boss. Once I got the word lady in place, I went ahead and removed that clear contact paper just as I did before, and I made sure that piece of the L was really laid right snug into where it needs to go in the B. For the transfer tape that I wanted to use, I'm not sure the name of this, but I got it on Amazon and it's just amazing. I love that it has the grids. It isn't too sticky. It transfers nice. And with it having the grids, I could really make sure I line this up super straight and get it exactly where I need to on my tumbler. For this next step, I'm going to go ahead and take my clear contact paper, the back sheet, and I'm going to trim that down. What this allows me to do is to take my wording and line it up on my tumbler so that my vinyl isn't sticking to my tumbler. It's actually the transfer paper that's sticking there just a little, and since it isn't going to fully stick, like not committing with that vinyl, I'm able to measure it all out, get my rulers, make sure it's completely straight and even in that area before I really commit to laying it on the tumbler. Once I'm happy with the placement and I know that it's about as good as I'm able to humanly get it, we're going to use the hinge method. Since this is laid down pretty tight on there, we're going to lift up one side off of our tumbler, peel away the backing, and then once that backing, that clear contact paper carrier sheet is out of the way, we can go ahead and lay it a little at a time and just get it to lay nicely on our tumbler without having any little bubbles in it. What I like to do is start from the middle and I kind of iron it down with my finger and I slowly work it back and forth until everything is laid down evenly. And then I'll go ahead and take my little squeegee and really make sure it's on there good before I go ahead and remove the transfer tape. All right, as always, when it comes to removing this transfer tape, keep it close to your tumbler and slowly roll it back. I find that doing it a little at a time and just taking your time and releasing it while it stays really close to your tumbler will help your vinyl not to lift off, especially if you have small little pieces on the edges that you want to make sure are laid right. When I did this, I did catch a little bubble somewhere in there, so I'm just lifting up this vinyl in one spot and working that bubble out, and then we're good to go with pinstriping. For the striping that I'm using, I'm not sure the sizes of this, but I do know that it came in a pack of 3 and I'm not using the biggest color. Not using the biggest size. I'm using like the middle one and the thinnest. We're going to put the thicker of the two right on that line to cover up the seam from where the vinyl meets the glitter. And then the thinnest one is going to be pretty evenly spaced out closer to the word boss. Also, I should say that I've noticed that when you lay it, for me at least, when I lay it down a little at a time, I don't know, it runs a little weird for me. It's easier for me to roll it out in one big stretch and then stand it up and make sure it's even and then commit to that straight line and make sure it's laid down. The times that I pull it just a little at a time and I lay it a little at a time, I feel that it gets a little wonky, like the line doesn't stay completely straight as far as just laying it in one big swoop. So I did take my time and really make sure that I stretched it out in one big swoop. I laid that down. I stood it up to make sure it was as straight as possible, and then I went ahead and kind of committed to that placement and ironed it down with my finger a little more. Next step, super important, take your craft knife and trim off those extra pieces that will lay over. You're going to want those pieces very close. Stop it just before it falls off the edges of your glitter and vinyl. That way it won't want to lift moving forward. After you get that done, we're going to go ahead and put on a layer of epoxy. For this one, I switched to the Fast Cure Epoxy by Flynn Sisters, and I just wanted to speed up the process a little. It still gives a gorgeous shine, and this has a dry time of 2 to 3 hours, and I can sand it and do another layer just after that. I would say 4 hours is when I'm comfortable doing it. But just a little hack for you guys while you watch me spread this on. If you have issues with your vinyl lifting, like any type of pinstriping, what you can do is throw down just a tiny bit of UV resin over the edges of where you think it might tend to lift. And you hit that with the light to cure it in place. And by the time you get your other normal epoxy on there, it'll blend right in. You won't have any issues with it. So if you have issues with pinstripes lifting, go ahead and try that little UV hack. It really does help. I have that spread on thin. Like I said, just a thin, easy layer. I grabbed my torch to pop any bubbles, and on this part right here, I just have a dry baby wipe with some rubbing alcohol. I'm bringing the bottom of this up really tight with that epoxy to make sure I get a really nice clean edge around there. Also, what it does is it pushes that epoxy up just a little so it doesn't wrap around my tumbler, and it also gives me a great seal for where the edges of that epoxy was. Okay, so I'm missing the video of where I poured the epoxy in here. It was really easy though. I just mixed some ivory glitter in with some fast cure epoxy, got it right in that bottom, and then once it set, this is probably about 4 hours later, I went through and I'm just trimming off any of the glitter and paint that may have been outside of that little circle to make sure all of my edges are really pretty. Okay, so another part that I forgot to video, but I will have the measurements down in the description as well, are the size of these circles. That floral part is just a piece of the vinyl that I had left over, and then I found some gold, a really pretty champagne gold vinyl metallic that really did well to match those pinstripings, and I went ahead and used that and did a double circle deal to match, you know, those thin pinstripes that we did on the end. This gold paint pen is absolutely amazing. I put down a layer of epoxy on here. That way, if I sign my name and mess up, I can just take some acetone, and I left this in to show you guys. Just take some acetone in a dry baby wipe and napkin and just wipe it off, and it comes right off. And then you can take that paint pen, go again once it dries, write your name on there, and then as soon as that dries, you can just do a layer of epoxy to go ahead and seal that all in. My epoxy of choice for the bottom is usually a fast setting epoxy, but UV resin is what I had on hand this day, and I was really excited to get it done and get moving with the next part of this. So I just grabbed that and I set it under for about 6 minutes or so. I have some rubbing alcohol, and I'm rubbing that around the edges with that dry baby wipe just to make sure that everything is cleaned up. After that's done, we're going on with a final layer of epoxy. I want this to come out really, really nice. So again, for this final layer, I am doing the Artist Cure epoxy. Like I said, the durability and shine of this is absolutely gorgeous. So make sure this coat of epoxy right here is perfect. Like, this is our final set of epoxy. So we want this to be really nice, guys. So get this smoothed on. Torch to pop any bubbles, your heat gun to move it around if you need to. And then again, I'm taking my baby wipe at the bottom and I'm cleaning off that bottom to make sure the bottom of this tumbler stays really nice and crisp. Okay, so my vision for this tumbler was to have Boss Lady and rhinestones. If I would have known it was going to be this absolutely gorgeous at this stage, I would have offset Boss in gold and I would have done Lady in gold. That same champagne gold to match the pinstriping and the circles on the bottom. At this stage, it was absolutely gorgeous, but my idea was rhinestone, so I went ahead and continued on with it. But a big piece of me was like, man, if I would have done that gold to offset and not thought of rhinestones, it would be the most beautiful tumbler I've ever made. I'm obsessed with it at this point, minus that offset, which it really needs. I didn't do the offset because I knew I was going to do rhinestones. So moving on to that part, I'm using Liquid Fusion here, and then for the rhinestones, honestly, guys, I don't feel comfortable giving advice on rhinestones yet because I'm still learning. I do know that it needs a base color. I like that I use this vinyl as a background because it did give me some forgiveness from where some of those stones, where there's little gaps, it kind of plays off that color instead of just being that beige glitter, ivory glitter in the background. It did play that off. The other advice that I know I can give is to give yourself a little area and get those stones set in place before you put more on, because it's easier when they're not trying to slide around on you. And when you do have kind of a starting point of a line that can't move, it does make everything else easier. The other thing I will say is that if you're doing scatter method, get one of the mix bags with a bunch of different sizes, and then also get a bag of SS3s. That's, I'm pretty sure, the smallest size that I've seen so far. And that makes a really good filler size for some areas where, you have a little gap, but you need something just small. It's easy to pop those little ones in place. So I just went ahead and probably took too long rhinestoning this, but it was easy. Just put your glue on, get them in place. I did the full word Boss first with all of those, and then I went in with this navy blue, and I love this navy blue and the pop of color. The contrast was really just so exciting for me. But like I said, if I would have thought of that gold offset, there's a chance I wouldn't have done the rhinestones. I would have saved it for someone else. But I don't know. I'm still pretty happy with how it came out. I think it's really fun. I don't know. I love it. I think it came out really pretty. And for the rhinestones, the mix I use for the word Boss is Spring Court from Flynn Sister Supply Shop, and Lady is done in Montana. You definitely need those threes for the word Lady and for the filler pieces. So whenever you go ahead and buy yourself a mix, make sure you get those threes because it really does help to fill in space. This is it all finished out in the sunlight after it was cleaned after a few days of sitting. To clean off the extra glue, I just used a nail brush with a little bit of Dawn dish soap and scrubbed it for a few minutes to make sure that all the extra glue came out of there. Again, guys, this came out so pretty. A big part of me wishes that I had another one with that offset like I talked about with the word boss lady, but it's still just so gorgeous. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. Please subscribe to this channel. Find us on Sippy Couture Community Facebook group, and then all of my links for everything I used today was listed down in that description. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all soon.